on a different malbush. The Rebbe's time, there was, before the Hitler, Yimach Shemai, the Rebbe's main work was because of the assimilation that was happening. My Shver used to tell me that there wasn't a Heimish Shtib come out in the whole of, I mean, he lived in Ger, then he moved to Varsha, and I think he was in Lodz for some time. Said every Shtib had somebody who went off the derech. If you look at the histories, I'm not saying from the article, but from real history books, of the Gedolim that we all knew, of Yanka Kamenetsky, Rav Aaron Kotler, they all came from, Rav Aaron had a sister who, even she got to America, she was a mathematician or something, a scientist. She used to make fun of Arika, her brother, the dummy of the family, who became a rabbi, Rav Aaron Kotler. Rav Aaron's cousin, Rav Kamenetsky, he was born in a farm, and he left, and he slept in shuls and the floors and on the benches, in yeshiva, because the assimilation was so strong that mamish, the creme of Klal Yisrael, the children were going off the derech. So into this cauldron of anguish and zerbrochenkeit came the Piasetzner Rebbe. The Piasetzner was the Ben Zikinim from the Grodzhetsky Rebbe. He was born, his father was already he was the child of the second Zivik from the Grodzhetsky Rebbe. His mother was the daughter of the Chanchina Rebbe, who was the Yida Kulish Zanenikel. I know you're all taking notes, so guess. But his father passed away. His father was a tremendous tzaddik, and he was nifter, and the Piasetzner Rebbe was 3 years old. So he barely knew his father, and he was raised more or less in the shtib from his uncle, who later on became his father-in-law. So this is how these things were. But his uncle was the Koshnitz the Rebbe in Koshnitz. He was an Einikel from the outlet Koshnitz Rebbe. So the Piasetzner was raised in this tumult, and he understood. And every part of his Chassidus, wherever you see him, open almost any page of all the Sforim that we've read, and he starts talking about the heart of Yiddishkeit. He would reach out to people at any level. It didn't matter. He was just someone who I didn't meet this person, but someone who did meet the person. There was an elderly woman living in America who said she remembered the Piasetzner Rebbe. She davened in his shul, and she remembers as a child that the Rebbe would pass the mechitza after davening and scream out Good Shabbos so that the little girls should say Amen from his brachas. He would give them a bracha, Good Shabbos, and they would all scream out Amen. Have that in mind, little kids, they should get something. And the Bochum, the kids, they were the Hasidus, they sat around him. He opened up a yeshiva, they had tremendous Talmidim, and this all came crashing down. And we all know the famous stories of how he survived, how he kept up Yiddishkeit in the ghetto, saying Torahs, and that the Torahs were written down, and they were put into milk cans, these big cans, and buried in the courtyard, and found later on after the war by some Goyish people, I don't know, workmen. They gave it over to the chaplain of the American Army, and that's what we have now. The Choyves HaTalmidim was printed, the only sefer he ever had printed before the war, but all the other Svurim, including the Aish Kodesh, the Torahs that he gave out in the middle of the ghetto, in the middle of the war. And he barely mentions the fact of what's happening. He talks about a tapestry of Yiddishkeit, about being in a dark place and how to uplift yourself. He brings down, he said, I just saw it today, he says, everyone is mechiv to pick up even each of us, no matter how much we feel that we're not worthy, pick up the broken shards of who you are and lift them up to Hashem. Give them to Hashem. Hashem is waiting for you. That's all Hashem wants. What more could you say in our generation right now? I don't know, who is now online. Most of you, I could see many of the faces, but we have a minion, by the way, Menashe, so don't worry about it. But the thing that is astounding, I speak to doctors all the day. I mean, that's what I have certain doctors who I'm very close to, and they call me up for chizik. I don't know. I guess because I'm an old man, so they like to hear me say things. But Lamaisa, everyone is touched by what's happening. I defy anyone to say blithely, there's nothing going on, it's okay. Even subconsciously, we're being worn down. And it's just another week, another kind of lockdown. Your lockdown, this lockdown. In America, the gas. It's just what's happening. It's just so horrible. Says the Rebbe, it's hard. It was horrible in his situation. It was horrible before the war. Even you have to pick up. You have to visualize who you want to be. Pick yourself up and reach up to Hashem. He was he wrote quite a bit about meditation. And if you want, we could maybe after we finish the Tzav Vziruz, we're almost finished with it. We'll pick up on some of his sfurim. He has certain parts of his sfurim that talk about meditation, about visualizing your thoughts. This is from a Hasidic Rebbe, who, by the way, knew medicine to the point where he wrote prescriptions in Latin, and they were accepted in all the apothecaries in Warsaw. And it was a time when people wouldn't go for an operation until the Rebbe said it's a viable thing. And certain doctors would come to the Rebbe to say, should we do this operation or not? He never went to medical school. He didn't go to college. He became a Rebbe at a young age. He just had that kind of a mind that soaked up what was necessary for that time. And there's a story that that is told over that there was a Yid that had headaches, tremendous migraines. And he came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe wrote a prescription. So the Yid said, "Was darf ich gehen to the chemist? I have the Rebbe's prescription. I'll put it in the lining of my hat." Right? And he had no more headaches. So after a year or two, the Rebbe was sitting with the oilim, it was a Shiur or something, and this Yid comes in and says, "Rebbe, I need a new prescription." He said, what? He said, "Well, the old one, because of my head sweats, the oisius got blurred on the piece of paper that I put in my hat band. So could you give me another prescription?" And he never had a headache again. You say it's not true. I happen to think, I'm almost sure, I don't want to say, but someone from my mishpucha told me it was a cousin of theirs or an uncle. It's because the mind had such an attachment to a tzaddik. And that's what the Rebbe said. So when he left, the second time, he gave him a prescription, he left. Some of the Talmidim started to laugh. He said, "Don't laugh. This is the way medicine works sometimes that way also." So this is a man who walked on this earth, tall, handsome man, who refused to leave the Eden. He could have gotten out. There was a whole thing about the church was going to give out a couple of passports, whatever. He said, "No, ich bin du mit meiner Eden. I'm not going anywhere." Some of you might have heard there was a shoe factory called Schultz's Shoe Factory, Shiur Fabrik. It was owned by a non-Jew. It was in the Warsaw Ghetto. And the manager was a fellow, a guy's in Handlers. And he gave over to the Gestapo names of rabbis who have to work in his fabrik. You see, that it was like a necessary factory that they needed because they needed somebody to manufacture boots. So these guys, those who were working in that factory until the ghetto was destroyed, those Yidden more or less got away. They weren't put on any death list. They weren't sent out to Auschwitz. So the Rebbe was there. There was other Rosh Yeshivas, Gedolim, Tzaddikim, and the Rebbe's job. Most of the time they stood around and they talked and learning, but they did do work also because they had to show that they're manufacturing something. So there were other guys who knew how to do the job, and they would work double time so that the Rabbanim should sit and learn. But each of them had a job, and when the Nazis came in, they had to do whatever was necessary doing their job. And the Rebbe's job was to sit on his hands and knees and sweep up with a little broom and a what do you call it again? A broom and shovel, the pieces that fell off, the bits and pieces of the leather, because they could use that again. And he's scraping together all this. And a Nazi once came in, and the Rebbe's on the floor, PSS the Rebbe, on the floor, sweeping up the bits and pieces from the leather. And he says, "Die verstunkene Jid, you're not working fast enough." And he kicked him in the face. Yes, that's the Rebbe. Kicked him in the face. Standing nearby was a Yid, Alexander Chusit. And he stooped down to the Rebbe and said, give me the broom, I'll do it, Rebbe. The Rebbe said, no, I have to do it. So this Yid says, "I'm an Alexander Chusit. My father was Meshamish, the Friedrich Rebbe, the Alexander Rebbe. My Zayde was a Meshamish by the Eishte Alexander Rebbe. Don't you think I shouldn't have the kubit to be Meshamish the Rebbe," meaning the Piasetzner? "Give me the broom, I'll do the dirty work." So the Rebbe wouldn't do it. Yeshamim, that he explained himself to somebody later, "My job, it seems to be, is to pick up the lowest pieces of Yiddish neshamalach, the bits and pieces that are falling down, and gather them together, even now. So I'm picking up these pieces of leather. What do I know? This is what I have to do. That's been my job all my life, picking up pieces of broken Jews. That's what we do. We pick up pieces of broken Jews." It was all done very pashtistic. Someone told me that there was someone who was a mishpach of his told over after the war that in the summer he lived in Varsha during the winter. In the summertime, from the middle of the summer, the 3 weeks, I think, he moved to Piasets and then stayed there till after Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. And he would take walks in the forest with the children of the shtetl and show them the different leaves, different trees, open up their eyes to the beauty of nature. Rebbe from thousands of Chassidim. Children, who's going to teach them? They didn't have Zoom. This was the tzaddik that today's is Yahrzeit. What can I say? I just looking through a couple of the bits and pieces I have here. I know that that the Bav Baruch, Reb Shlomo, I've said this over several times. The Reb Shlomo, the Bav Baruch was in Varsha. It was a famous asifa called the Warsaw Asifa. All the Rabbanim from Galicia and Poland came together it was about Shechita and different other problems. It was before the war, obviously. The Bav Baruch, Reb Shlomo, was then the Rav of Baba. His father was the Rebbe and he was the Rav. So he came and he took out of his day, he was only there for a day or two, whatever it was. He took time out to sit with the Piasetzner Rebbe, because he was also the Rosh Yeshiva of the Yeshiva in Baba, but he wanted to hear from the Piasetzner Rebbe about Chinuch. He wanted to know about Chinuch. If you need to know about Chinuch, who do you go to? You go to the biggest maven, the biggest gadol who understands Chinuch. The Baal Chavis HaTalmid. So that's, this is, it's beyond our understanding. It was interesting that I came across after the ghetto was liquidated, he was sent to a death camp. Now there was a group of Askonim, call them, not religious, assimilated. The Rebbe was people that were looked up to by the Tzabroch and the Nebuch, the Shiur, the Yidden that were still alive. And they made it between themselves a contract that they will stick together and not leave anyone behind, no matter what happens. Because if they start running, if someone gets, one of them gets out, another one goes out, the Yidden that are left behind will lose faith. They'll lose mood. They'll think that they're being left behind. So they made a contract. And again, the Rebbe could have gotten out. He was offered a passport, and he said, no. Who did he make a contract with? A bunch of guys most of them weren't even Shem Shabbat. Doesn't matter. I gave my hand. And I'll die that way. So this is the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. That, we read about such things. And we can't really be masik. We can't understand what it means, such a spirituality. But at the same time, he was a man of this world. So I always say over the story about the größte mitzvah in the world is the Tina Yida Tova. But I know you all know the story because you heard it from me 100 times before. Like the Rebbe geschrieben, the last Simchas Torah. That Simchas Torah before, he had lost his whole family, Kamat, in the beginning of, the Germans attacked Poland, Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe's only son was mortally wounded. He survived a couple of days afterwards, but he died. His daughter-in-law was killed because a bomb. They were standing, waiting outside the hospital to hear what's happening with this son. And a bomb hit them, direct hit. The Rebbe had gone seeking a doctor. So he was saved. But his daughter-in-law and his mechetenis, and they all died. And the Rebbe didn't say anything because it was Yontif. But this is all happening in Shenitzikis. It was only after Yontif that they could hear him cry. And a week or two after that, his mother died. She was 85 years old. She died because of a broken heart. This was just the beginning of the war. So the Rebbe wrote this sefer that we learned together, the Tzav Vziruz, that we're up to chapter 17, but I'm going to do chapter 19 because 17 is not apropos, and this one I think is a big chizik for the discussion of tonight. We'll go back and do the one that I missed out. The two of them, we'll do that next time. So the Rebbe has in chapter 19, he starts off, he says, the chapter has a title, The Rebbe's Midlife Transition. So here's the Rebbe's words. Baruch Hashem, thank God. I'm already in my 40th year of life. And in a few months, it will be my 40th birthday. Now, in those days, 40 years old, you were doing all right. You know, after that, he says, begins the decline of life. In those days, 40, you're already getting ready for pension, you know. The train starts slowing down. So he says, I'm afraid. Again, this is written for everyone to read. He wasn't hiding anything about himself. He says, I'm afraid. Then he says, very afraid. Not so much from the inevitable passing of my life. Living is a terminal illness, right? But from the spiritual poverty of my years do I shudder. They are gone. I'm 40 years old. Just what I didn't do, I didn't do. I missed out. I should have, I could have. So that's all gone, past, empty, void, wasted on childish games. Worries about things that never came apart, you know, that never came to be. Think about it. I look around, I see a couple of your faces. Some of you are pushing 40, some of you might be pushing something higher. Oy, all the years, all the stupid Narishkeit. Gesessen in Shul and potted away Shiurs mit Machloikes, mit Narishkeit, mit what? What will be with you, mortal creature, he says. I tell this to myself. What will be with you, you mortal creature? Your prime of life is gone. And now, when you've reached your decline, in other words, when the inevitable process of dying has begun, only now do you remember that there's an Eibishter? Oh, jetzt bist du geworden verfrummer. Sure, when you were younger, now that you're getting a bit old, oh yeah, now I gotta go get my connection with God, yeah. And even now, can I be sure of myself? Yes, of himself. How many periods of inspiration and improvement have I already had in my life? And what happened to them? Yeah, I had those moments. I was in yeshiva. I heard a good drosha. You know, I get these clips all day, and everyone is talking. You get on the what happened? You turn the page over. Sorry. They passed like snow on a summer's day, says the Rebbe. This happened at previous transitions of my life, before my bar mitzvah, before my chasna. I experienced then such deep inspiration. And I felt so strong and firm in my convictions. I said to myself that from then on, I was certain to be an Oved Hashem. And who knows if even now, once I become accustomed to being past 40, that the past will not happen again. In other words, I'm all right. Ich bin schon ein alter Yid. Now I'm going to really mean it. Who says? Now I'll get stuck at home and I'll sleep off a day or two, or 3 or 10. All the inspiration and aspirations will melt and disappear, as there is no trace left for my earlier inspirations. I just wanted you to hear, think, the person who's writing this is a Kodesh, and he's just letting it out there. You wouldn't see anyone talking this way. What will be left? What's going to be left for me? But I dare not despair, says the Rebbe. Oh, no. My heart pounds for my impending 40th birthday. My entire body shakes for my oncoming declining years. Still, I will try to muster up all my strength and commit myself and my life to Hashem. Perhaps, perhaps something will remain. So what should I commit myself to today? This is what he's saying. 40 years old. What am I going to commit myself to? To learn more? I think I learn as much as possible. I don't waste any time. To abstain from physical pleasures. My own desires are not fooling me. Thank Hashem, Baruch Hashem. I'm not so attached to them. I'm a person. I don't have fantasies. So what am I missing? What am I missing? Simply to be a Yid. A Pashat Yid. Simply to be a Yid. I see myself as a self-portrait that shows all the colors and the features of real to my life. Just one thing is missing. My neshama. So it's a play act. Is it real? Read in the neshama. I daven. Is my neshama there? I be Rebbe Shalom, who sees my innermost secrets. Before you, I confess. You, I beseech, I beg. I feel so cast aside and distanced from you and from your holy presence. Help me, help me. I want to become a Pashat, a simple Yid. It's a powerful thing to be a simple Yid. I wish to save me from wasting the rest of my years chasing illusions of life. Draw me closer. Bring me into your innermost presence. Bind me to you, Eibishter, forever and ever, in a wealth of spirit and neshama. That's the Rebbe, that's the Rebbe. I ask you all to drink a l'chaim with me.